Let's rewind to the early 11th century, a time when England wasn't exactly having the best luck with its kings. Between Viking invasions, royal betrayals, and warlords with names like Forkbeard, this wasn't just a Game of Thrones. It was a full-blown chaos fest, and out of this messy stew of battles and betrayals rose a warrior prince named Edmund. Not just any Edmund, though. Edmund Ironside, the man who fought tooth and nail for England, only to meet one of the most bizarre and, let's be honest, undignified ends in royal history. The story begins in 1013. Svein Forkbeard, the Viking king of both Denmark and Norway, decided it was time to add England to his resume. So he did what Vikings do best, invaded. With a fleet full of warriors, many still loyal to the Old Norse gods, he forced King Ethelred to flee. Ethelred, known by the wonderfully unflattering nickname the Unready, was anything but prepared. Though, to be fair, Andrew, unready might just be a bad translation of the Old English word unraid, meaning bad counsel. Either way, things weren't looking good for him. When Svein dropped dead the next year, because even Viking kings can't conquer death, Ethelred made a comeback. But there was a catch. Svein's young son, Nut, wasn't about to let England slip away. He gathered an army and launched an invasion of his own. England, already on its knees from Viking raids and its own leadership problems, was in full-blown crisis mode. This wasn't like the last time Vikings showed up either. The English hadn't seen this kind of upheaval since the days of Alfred the Great and the Great Heathen Army over 100 years before. But now, there was no Alfred, no strong king to rally behind. What they had was Ethelred, a man who leaned hard into appeasement, handing over large sums of tribute or Danegeld to make the Danes go away. Unsurprisingly, that didn't really work. By 1016, Ethelred was dead, and the spotlight shifted to his son, Edmund. And this wasn't just a grieving prince. This was a battle-hardened warrior with a reputation. He didn't sit on the sidelines. He'd spent much of his life in the thick of combat, swinging swords and earning scars. This was a man who reportedly wielded a massive longsword that once belonged to Offa, a legendary Anglo-Saxon king of Mercia. Not exactly someone who was going to sit quietly and let Nut take over. After his father's death, Edmund didn't wait for the dust to settle. He declared himself king and got to work. England was split, literally. Some nobles wanted Cnut, others backed Edmund. Betrayals were flying left and right. Even before Ethelred breathed his last, some of the Witan, England's Council of Nobles, were already leaning toward Cnut. That didn't stop Edmund. He launched a campaign that saw battle after battle, rallying troops wherever he could. Victories at Penselwood and Shurston helped solidify his reputation. He even lifted the siege of London and pushed Cnut's forces all the way to the Isle of Sheppey. At one point, Cnut had to retreat to Essex and regroup. It was clear Edmund wasn't some noble brat with a crown. He was the real deal. The kind of leader who inspired men to follow him into battle, even when the odds were stacked high. That's how he earned the name Edmund Ironside. Not from some poetic flair, but because he genuinely fought like he was made of iron. But war is never just about weapons and warriors. It's about people, and one man in particular proved to be a thorn in Edmund's side, Edric Striona, the Earl of Mercia. If medieval England had a list of most hated characters, Edric would be top 5, no question. At the Battle of Asandun on October 18, 1016, Edric pulled a move so treacherous it could have been pulled straight from a villain's playbook. Right when things were heating up, he took his men and fled the battlefield, tipping the balance in Cnut's favor. Whether this betrayal was premeditated or just cowardice, it spelled doom for Edmund's army. Still, Ironside didn't fold. He fought on, leading his troops until nightfall before finally withdrawing. The result? A truce. Edmund and Nut agreed to split England between them. The north and east went to Cnut. Edmund kept the Saxon stronghold of Wessex. The Treaty of Alney was the best compromise anyone could have hoped for. Peace, at least for now. But peace didn't last long. Not even a full month later, on either November the 29th or 30th, depending on which chronicle gets the final say, Edmund Ironside was dead. And here's where things get weird. The Anglo-Saxon chronicle kept it vague, just said he died. No big details. But later sources, they had ideas. Henry of Huntingdon, writing in the 1120s, painted a scene so wild it's impossible to ignore. According to him, Edmund had gone to relieve himself, just a regular king doing kingly business, and ended up getting stabbed from beneath by a dagger. not from an assassin who ran into the royal chamber, but from someone hiding in the cesspit. The tale claims it was Edric's son, lying in wait with a dagger, who skewered the king from below as he sat on the throne. Well, the other kind of throne. That's right, killed on the toilet. Royal dignity be damned. Now, before jumping to conclusions, this version raises a few logistical questions, like how did the assassin know it was definitely the king using the privy at that exact time? And wouldn't it be hard to stab someone from way down in a cesspit with a dagger? The medieval toilet setup wasn't exactly convenient for assassins. That's why later versions started tweaking the details. One version swapped the dagger for a spear, which makes a bit more sense. A longer reach, less risk. Another, even more theatrical account claims that the privy had been rigged with a spring-loaded crossbow, triggered by the king's own royal backside. Picture it, a hidden contraption, a string tied to the seat. And the moment Edmund sat down, boom, arrow straight up, a real medieval booby trap. And just imagine the kind of craftsmanship it would have taken to set that up in complete secrecy. Someone had to sneak into the royal privy, rig a deadly mechanism, and hope the king didn't notice anything strange about his seat. Not exactly a DIY project you knock out before lunch. Plus, would the servants really not catch on? Royal chambers weren't exactly empty. There were attendants, guards, people scrubbing things, or pretending to. And what if someone else had used the toilet first? Talk about a misfire of historic proportions. Even more curious, how would Edric's son, assuming he was the culprit, get in and out of a cesspit alive, undetected and unsplattered? There's also the smell. Hiding in human waste doesn't exactly make for a stealthy escape. It's equal parts gruesome and cartoonish, yet somehow this version of events kept resurfacing in medieval chronicles, getting more embellished with each retelling. Maybe it was propaganda, maybe it was dark humor, or maybe, just maybe, medieval people really loved a dramatic toilet tale. A French chronicler named Gaimard went with that version, calling it the bow that does not fail. Not exactly the kind of throne room anyone would want to walk into, but not everyone bought into the murder theory. Some chroniclers, people like William of Malmesbury and John of Worcester, said nothing about foul play, no assassination, no privy ambush, just a sudden death. Others, like the German writer Adam of Bremen, claimed Edmund was poisoned. That theory has fewer logistical hurdles. Modern historians tend to lean toward natural causes. After all, life in 1016 wasn't exactly known for longevity. Even young and fit warriors could suddenly keel over from infection, internal injuries, or illnesses nobody understood back then. But still, Edmund had just divided the kingdom with his enemy. The timing of his death was beyond suspicious. Nut, the man who stood to gain everything from Edmund's demise, ended up ruling all of England after that. It's hard not to raise an eyebrow. Nut went on to become one of the most effective kings England ever had. He didn't raise the land or start purging Saxon nobles. Instead, he kept much of the existing Anglo-Saxon structure in place. He brought powerful lords like Godwin of Wessex into his inner circle, people who would later shape the future of the realm. He ruled over not just England, but Denmark and Norway too, building a North Sea empire that lasted until his death in 1035. Even more surprising, Nut reportedly paid a visit to Edmund's grave years later to pay his respects. Whether that was out of genuine honor or political theater, who knows? But it says something. Despite the war, despite the rivalry, Edmund Ironside had earned his respect. His death remains one of medieval history's strangest unsolved mysteries. Was it a clever assassination by toilet dagger? A tragic case of poisoning? Or just nature taking its toll on a battle-worn king? Whatever the truth, the story of Edmund Ironside lingers, not just because of how he died, but because of how fiercely he lived. In a world overrun by Vikings and betrayal, he stood up, grabbed a sword, and fought for every inch of land he could hold. And then, maybe, just maybe, he got stabbed in the butt for his trouble. Either way, not a bad legacy for someone who was never even supposed to be king. Thanks for watching. If that tale of medieval mayhem kept things interesting, consider hitting that like button, subscribe for more strange but true history, and drop a comment below with the weirdest royal story you've ever heard. There's plenty more where this came from.